If you have ever walked through the grand halls of the Whitmore Performing Arts Center, you might have seen him. An older man, maybe in his late 50s, pushing a cleaning cart down the marble corridors. His uniform was always a little faded, washed so many times that the blue had turned almost gray. He wore simple black shoes, the kind that made no sound when he walked. And he moved through that building like a ghost, quiet, unnoticed, invisible. People called him Uncle, not because anyone knew his real name, but because that is just what everyone started calling him over the years. The security guards would wave at him. The ticket sellers would nod. The performers, the famous ones who flew in from cities all over the world, would walk right past him without a second glance. And he never seemed to mind. He just kept his head down and did his work. He had been the janitor at Whitmore for nearly 19 years. 19 years of sweeping the same floors. 19 years of polishing the same brass door handles until they shined like gold. 19 years of emptying trash cans, wiping down seats, and cleaning the restrooms after every show. It was not glamorous work. It was not the kind of job that made people stop and say, "Thank you." But he did it with care. He did it like it mattered. And maybe, to him, it did. You see, Whitmore was not just any building. It was one of the most famous concert halls in the country. The walls were lined with photographs of legendary musicians. The ceiling was painted with angels and clouds, a masterpiece that took 3 years to complete. And at the center of the main stage sat a piano. A 9-foot Steinway grand, worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. That piano had been touched by the greatest hands in the world. Fingers that had trained for decades. Fingers that had played for kings and presidents. And every night, after the crowds went home and the lights dimmed low, Uncle would stand near the edge of the stage and just look at it. He never touched it. He never even got too close. He would just stand there for a minute or two, his mop resting against his shoulder, staring at the piano like it was an old friend he had not spoken to in years. Then he would take a deep breath, turn around, and get back to work. No one ever asked him why he did that. No one noticed. But there was something about the way he looked at that piano. Something deep. Something sad. Like he was remembering a different life. A life that had slipped through his fingers a long time ago. On this particular evening, the center had just finished hosting a charity gala. It was one of those fancy events where people wore expensive clothes and drank champagne and pretended to care about causes they would forget by morning. The main performer had been a young pianist from Europe, barely 25 years old, already being called a genius by critics around the world. He had played beautifully. The audience had given him a standing ovation. And then, like always, everyone had left. Uncle started his rounds a little after 10. The cleaning crew had already handled most of the lobby, so he made his way to the main concert hall. The lights were dim, just a few spotlights left on near the stage. The seats were empty. The silence was so thick you could almost feel it pressing against your ears. But as he pushed his cart down the center aisle, he heard something, voices, laughter, coming from near the stage. He slowed down and squinted through the darkness. There, gathered around the piano, was a group of young people. 5 of them, maybe 6. They looked like college students, probably from the music school across the street. They must have snuck in after the show, hoping to get a closer look at the famous Steinway. Uncle sighed quietly. This was not the first time something like this had happened. Young people were curious. They wanted to touch history. He understood that. But he also knew he would have to ask them to leave soon. The building needed to be locked up by midnight. He walked closer, his footsteps soft against the carpet. One of the students, a young man with messy hair and a confident smile, was sitting on the piano bench. He pressed a few keys, just messing around, playing random notes that echoed through the empty hall. "Come on, play something real," one of his friends said. Laughing, I am playing, the young man shot back. This is modern art. You just do not understand it. The group burst into laughter. Another student, a girl with glasses and a notebook tucked under her arm, shook her head. You are terrible. Absolutely terrible. Then you play something, the young man said, standing up and gesturing to the bench. No way. I am not touching that thing. Do you know how much it costs? Uncle stopped a few feet away from the group. He cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle them. Excuse me, he said, his voice soft and polite. The building is closing soon. You will need to leave in a few minutes. The students turned to look at him. For a moment, no one said anything. They just stared, taking in his faded uniform, his worn-out shoes, the mop handle sticking out of his cart. One of them, a tall boy with headphones around his neck, smirked a little. Not in a mean way, but in the way young people sometimes do when they see someone they think is not important. Yeah, okay, we will head out soon, the tall boy said. Just give us a couple more minutes. Uncle nodded. He did not push. He never pushed. He just stood there, waiting patiently, his hands folded in front of him. But then the girl with the glasses looked at him with a curious expression. Maybe she was bored. Maybe she was just trying to be funny. Or maybe, somewhere deep down, she was genuinely curious. Whatever the reason, she asked a question that would change everything. Hey, she said, tilting her head slightly. You work here, right? You have probably seen a lot of performers. Uncle nodded again. Yes, many. Have you ever wanted to play? She asked. Like, have you ever sat down at that piano and just tried? The other students chuckled. The young man who had been messing around on the keys earlier grinned. Yeah, Uncle, you should play us something. Give us a private concert. It was a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. The old janitor, playing on a piano worth more than a house? The idea was absurd. They expected him to smile politely and shake his head. They expected him to say something humble, something like, "Oh no, I could never," and then shuffle away with his cleaning card. But he did not do that. Instead, he went very still. His eyes moved slowly from the students to the piano. And for a long moment, he just stood there, staring at it the same way he did every night. That deep, sad look. That look of someone remembering something painful. The laughter faded. The students exchanged confused glances. Something in the air had shifted. Something none of them could explain. And then, without saying a word, the old man took a step toward the stage. The students watched in silence as the old janitor walked toward the stage. His steps were slow, almost hesitant, like a man approaching something sacred. The cleaning cart stayed behind, forgotten in the aisle. His mop leaned against one of the velvet seats. Drooping quietly onto the carpet. No one said a word. The young man with the messy hair, the one who had been fooling around on the piano earlier, opened his mouth like he was about to crack another joke. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the old man moved. Maybe it was the look on his face. Whatever it was, the joke died before it even started. The janitor climbed the 3 small steps that led up to the stage. Under the dim spotlight, his faded uniform looked even more worn. There were stains near the pockets. The elbows were thin from years of scrubbing and wiping. His shoes, old and scuffed, made soft sounds against the polished wood of the stage floor. He stood in front of the piano for a moment. Just stood there. His back was to the students, so they could not see his face. But they could see his shoulders rise and fall as he took a slow, deep breath. The girl with the glasses leaned toward her friend and whispered, "Is he actually going to play?" Her friend shrugged, already pulling out his phone. "This is going to be hilarious," he muttered, opening the camera app. The janitor plays Steinway, classic. A few of the others did the same. Phones came out of pockets. Screens lit up in the darkness. They were not being cruel, not really. They were just young. They did not know any better. To them, this was just a funny moment. A random old man about to embarrass himself on a piano worth more than their college tuition. They had no idea what was coming. The janitor pulled out the bench slowly. It made a soft scraping sound against the stage. He looked down at it for a second, running his fingers along the edge of the wood like he was remembering something. Then he sat down. His posture was different now, straighter, more focused. His hands rested on his knees for a moment, and the students noticed something they had not seen before. His fingers. They were long, surprisingly long. The kind of fingers you see on concert pianists in magazines and documentaries. But they were also rough, calloused. The hands of a man who had spent decades doing hard, physical work. The tall boy with the headphones nudged his friend. "Look at his hands," he whispered. "Weird, right?" His friend snorted. "Dude, just wait. This is going to be gold." The janitor lifted his hands and placed them gently on the keys. He did not press down right away. He just let his fingers rest there, feeling the cool ivory beneath his skin. His eyes were half closed. His breathing was slow and steady. And then he played. The first note was soft, almost too soft. It floated through the empty concert hall like a whisper, merely loud enough to hear. Then came another note, and another, a simple melody, the kind of thing a child might play during their first piano lesson. Basic, unimpressive, nothing special. One of the students stifled a laugh. Another one grinned and kept recording. The girl with the glasses shook her head slightly, a small smile on her lips. She almost felt bad for him. Here was this sweet old man, probably just trying to have a moment, and he clearly had no idea what he was doing. "Told you," the messy-haired boy whispered. "Total beginner." The melody continued. Simple chords, easy patterns, the kind of music you hear in waiting rooms or elevator lobbies. It was not bad, exactly. It was just ordinary, forgettable. The students started to lose interest. A couple of them lowered their phones. One girl checked her messages. The tall boy yawned. But then something strange happened. The janitor stopped playing. His hands lifted off the keys and hovered in the air for a moment. The last note faded into silence. The students looked up, confused. Was he done? Had he given up? Maybe he realized he was out of his depth and decided to quit. Before things got worse, but he did not move from the bench. Instead, he sat there, perfectly still, his eyes now fully closed. His chest rose and fell with one long, deep breath. It was the kind of breath a diver takes before plunging into deep water. The kind of breath an athlete takes before the race of their life. The girl with the glasses felt a strange chill run down her spine. She did not know why. There was no reason to feel nervous. It was just an old janitor sitting at a piano. But something in the air had changed. Something she could not explain. The tall boy with the headphones noticed it too. He lowered his phone slowly, his eyes fixed on the figure at the piano. "What is he doing?" He whispered that no one answered. The janitor's hands came back down to the keys. But this time, his fingers were positioned differently. They were curved, precise, resting on the keys with a kind of confidence that had not been there before. His shoulders relaxed. His head tilted slightly to the side. And then he opened his eyes. There was something in those eyes now. Something deep. Something fierce. The students could not see his face clearly from where they stood, but they could feel it. A shift, a transformation. Like they were no longer looking at the same man. The messy-haired boy felt his smile fade. The girl with the glasses took a small step forward, her notebook pressed tightly against her chest. Even the boy who had been checking his messages looked up from his phone. The janitor's fingers pressed down on the keys, and the world changed. The first chord hit like thunder. It rolled through the concert hall with a power and intensity that made everyone freeze. It was deep. It was rich. It was the kind of sound that vibrated in your chest and made your heart skip a beat. Before anyone could react, his fingers began to move. Not slowly this time. Not carefully. They flew across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible. Notes poured out of the piano like water bursting from a dam. Fast, relentless, beautiful. The students stood frozen, their mouths hanging open. One of them dropped their phone. It clattered to the floor, but no one even noticed. They could not look away. They could not breathe. This was not a beginner. This was not some old man messing around on a fancy piano. This was something else entirely. The melody climbed higher and higher, building with an intensity that felt almost dangerous. Then it dropped into a low, haunting passage that made the hair stand up on the back of your neck. The janitor's body swayed with the music, his eyes closed again, completely lost in the sound. The girl with the glasses felt tears welling up in her eyes. She did not understand why. She had heard hundreds of performances in her life. She was a music student, after all. She knew talent when she saw it, but this was beyond talent. This was something raw, something real, something that came from a place so deep it almost hurt to listen. The messy hair boy finally found his voice. It came out as a whisper, barely louder than the music itself. Who is this guy? No one had an answer, and the music played on. The music filled every corner of the concert hall. It climbed up the painted walls, danced across the ceiling with its angels and clouds, and wrapped itself around the empty velvet seats like a living thing. The sound was so big, so powerful, that it felt like the whole building was breathing with it. The janitor played like a man possessed. His fingers moved so fast they were almost a blur. Up and down the keys they flew, never missing a note, never hesitating. His whole body moved with the melody. His shoulders rose and fell. His head swayed from side to side. Sometimes he leaned so far forward that his forehead nearly touched the piano. Other times he pulled back, his spine arching as his hands stretched across the keyboard. The students stood frozen at the edge of the stage. None of them had moved since the first thundering chord. They could not move. It was like their feet had been glued to the floor, like the music had cast some kind of spell over them and they were powerless to break it. The tall boy with the headphones had stopped breathing. He did not even realize it until his chest started to burn and he had to force himself to take a breath. His phone hung limply at his side, still recording, but he had forgotten all about it. All he could do was stare at the old man on the stage and wonder how any of this was possible. The girl with the glasses had given up trying to hold back her tears. They streamed down her cheeks freely now, dripping off her chin and landing on her notebook. She did not wipe them away. She did not care. Something about this music had cracked her open, reached inside, and touched a part of her she did not even know existed. She had studied piano for 12 years. 12 years of lessons, practice, competitions. She had heard recordings of the greatest pianists in history. She had attended concerts by world-famous performers. But she had never, not once in her entire life, heard anything like this. It was not just the technical skill. Yes, the man's fingers were incredible. Yes, his speed and precision were beyond anything she had ever seen in person. But that was not what made this performance special. It was something else. Something deeper. It was the feeling. Every note carried emotion. Every chord told a story. When the melody climbed high, it felt like hope. Like watching the sun rise after a long, dark night. When it dropped low, it felt like grief. like remembering someone you loved and lost. The music laughed and cried and screamed and whispered, sometimes all within the space of a few seconds. This was not just a man playing piano. This was a man pouring out his entire soul. The messy-haired boy, the one who had been joking around earlier, felt something strange happening in his chest. A tightness. An ache. He thought about his grandmother, who had passed away 2 years ago. He thought about how she used to hum to herself while she cooked. He thought about the last time he saw her, lying in that hospital bed, too weak to even open her eyes. He did not know why this music made him think of her, but it did. And for the first time since her funeral, he felt the tears come. He turned away quickly, embarrassed. He did not want his friends to see him crying. But when he glanced at them, he realized he was not alone. The tall boy's eyes were red. One of the girls had her hand pressed over her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Even the boy who had been checking his messages earlier was standing perfectly still, his face pale, his eyes wide. The music had broken all of them. On the stage, the janitor played on. He had no idea what was happening in the audience. He could not see the tears. He could not hear the soft sobs. His eyes were closed, and he was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere far away from this concert hall. Somewhere in the past, the melody shifted again. It became faster, more urgent. The notes tumbled over each other like stones rolling down a hill. There was a sense of building, of rising, like a wave gathering strength before it crashes against the shore. The janitor's hands moved even faster now. His fingers struck the keys with a force that made the whole piano tremble. The students felt it too. The building tension, the growing pressure. It was like standing on train tracks and hearing the locomotive coming. You knew something big was about to happen. You could feel it in your bones. And then it came. The climax. The janitor's hands came down on the keys with everything he had. The sound that exploded from the piano was unlike anything the students had ever heard. It was massive, overwhelming. It filled the concert hall so completely that there was no room for anything else. No room for thought. No room for breath. Just the music. Just the raw, incredible, earth-shaking music. The girl with the glasses actually stumbled backward. Her legs had gone weak. She reached out and grabbed her friend's arm just to keep herself standing. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The janitor held that final chord for what felt like forever. His whole body was tense, every muscle straining, pouring every last drop of energy into the sound. And then, slowly, he began to bring it down. The volume faded. The tension released. The storm passed. What came next was soft, gentle, a quiet melody that floated through the air like a feather drifting on a breeze. After all that power, all that intensity, this simple, delicate passage felt almost unbearably beautiful. It was like the first ray of sunlight after a terrible storm. Like the moment when you finally stop crying and take your first clear breath. The janitor played the final notes with his eyes still closed. His fingers moved slowly now, carefully, placing each note exactly where it needed to be. And when he pressed the last key, he let the sound linger. It hung in the air, vibrating, alive. And then it was gone. Silence. Complete. Absolute silence. The janitor sat perfectly still. His hands rested on the keys. His head was bowed. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint echo of the music, still ringing in their ears like a memory. Then, slowly, the janitor lifted his head. He opened his eyes. And when he turned to look at the students, his face was wet with tears. He had not realized he was crying either. For a few seconds, they just stared at each other. The old janitor in his faded uniform. The young music students with their expensive phones and their fancy degrees. They came from different worlds, different generations, different lives. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The girl with the glasses started to clap. It was soft at first, hesitant. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely bring them together. But she clapped. And then the tall boy joined in. And then the messy-haired boy. And then everyone. The applause grew. It filled the empty concert hall, bouncing off the walls and the painted ceiling. It was not the polite, practiced applause that audiences give at formal events. It was real, raw, desperate, almost. Like they were trying to say something they could not put into words. The janitor looked at them. A small, tired smile crossed his face. He nodded once. Just a simple nod. Like he was thanking them. Then he stood up from the bench, turned away from the piano, and started walking back toward his cleaning cart. But the girl with the glasses was not ready to let him go. Not yet. She had to know. She had to understand. "Wait," she called out, her voice cracking. "Please, who are you?" The janitor stopped. His back was still to them. He did not turn around right away. When he finally did, that sad look was back in his eyes. The same look the students had seen before, when he was staring at the piano from across the hall. He took a deep breath, and then he told them. The janitor stood at the edge of the stage, looking down at the young faces staring up at him. They were waiting, hoping, desperate to understand what they had just witnessed. He could see the tears on their cheeks, the confusion in their eyes. They needed answers. He was not sure he had any to give. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stood there, his hands hanging at his sides, his gaze distant. The weight of the past pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy coat he had worn for too many years. Then, slowly, he sat down on the edge of the stage. His legs dangled over the side like a child sitting on a dock. It was a strange image. This old man in his faded uniform, sitting on the stage of one of the most famous concert halls in the country, looking small and tired and human. The students moved closer. They sat down on the floor in front of him, crossing their legs, leaning forward. No one pulled out their phones this time. No one thought about recording. This moment was not for the internet. This moment was just for them. The janitor took a deep breath and began to speak. "I grew up in a small village," he said. His voice was soft, barely louder than a whisper. Very small. Only a few hundred people. We did not have much. My father worked in the fields. My mother took care of the house. We were poor, but we were happy. He paused, his eyes looking at something far away. Something the students could not see. There was a church in our village, old, crumbling. But inside that church, there was a piano. Nobody knew where it came from. It had been there longer than anyone could remember. Most of the keys did not work. The wood was cracked. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. The girl with the glasses wiped her eyes and listened. I was 5 years old the first time I touched it. I still remember the feeling. The cool keys under my fingers. The sound that came out when I pressed down. It was like magic. I did not understand it. I just knew I loved it. A small smile crossed his face. It was the first real smile the students had seen from him. I started going to that church every day. Before school. After school. Sometimes I would sneak out at night just to play. I taught myself. There were no teachers in our village. No books. No lessons. I just listened and tried to copy what I heard. The songs on the radio. The music from the television at the market. Anything I could find. The tall boy with the headphones shook his head slowly. "You taught yourself?" he asked. "But that piece you just played, that was Chopin. That is one of the hardest pieces in the world." The janitor nodded. "Yes, I did not know that at the time. I just heard it once on an old recording, and I thought it was beautiful. So I learned it. It took me 3 years. 3 years of playing on that broken piano in that old church. But I learned it. The students exchanged looks of disbelief. 3 years. On a broken piano. With no teacher. It did not seem possible. When I was 17, the janitor continued, a man came to our village. He was a professor from a big music school in the city. He had gotten lost on his way somewhere else and stopped to ask for directions. Someone told him about me. The strange boy who played piano in the church. He laughed softly. It was a sad laugh. He came to hear me play. I was so nervous. I had never played for anyone important before. But I sat down at that broken piano and I played the only piece I knew by heart. The Chopin piece. The same one I played tonight. The janitor's voice grew quieter. When I finished, the professor was crying. He said he had never heard anything like it. He said it had a gift. A rare gift. He said I could be one of the greatest pianists in the world if I had the right training. The girl with the glasses felt her heart breaking. She already knew this story did not have a happy ending. He offered me a full scholarship. Everything paid for. Housing, food, lessons with the best teachers. It was a dream. The kind of dream boys like me were not supposed to have. The janitor's hands were trembling now. He folded them in his lap, trying to keep them still. I went home to tell my parents. I was so excited. I thought they would be proud. I thought they would be happy. He stopped. The silence stretched out. But when I got home, my mother was crying. My father was sitting at the table with his head in his hands. They told me that my father was sick. Very sick. The doctors said he only had a few months to live. Maybe a year if we were lucky. The messy-haired boy lowered his head. He thought about his grandmother again. About the hospital room. About the machines beeping in the darkness. I could not leave them, the janitor said. I could not go to the city and chase my dream while my father was dying and my mother was alone. So I said no. I turned down the scholarship. I stayed in the village and I took care of my family. His voice cracked. My father lived for 3 more years. 3 years longer than the doctors said. I like to think it was because he was not alone. Because I was there. Tears were falling down his face now. He did not try to hide them. After he died, I took care of my mother. I worked whatever jobs I could find. Farming, construction, cleaning. I sent her money every month until she passed away too. And by the time she was gone, I was already an old man. The dream was over. The music school would not take someone like me. Not anymore. The girl with the glasses was sobbing quietly. She could not help it. This story was too painful. Too real. So how did you end up here? The tall boy asked gently. At Whitmore? The janitor smiled again. That same sad, tired smile. When my mother died, I had nothing left. No family. No home. No purpose. I came to this country to start over. I took the first job I could find. It happened to be here, at this concert hall. I did not plan it. It was just luck. Or maybe fate. I do not know. He looked back at the piano, still sitting there under the spotlight. The first time I saw that piano, I cried. I stood in the empty hall after everyone had gone home, and I cried like a baby. It was like seeing an old friend I had abandoned. His voice dropped to a whisper. I made a promise to myself that night. I would never touch it. I did not deserve to. I had given up music. I had no right to play anymore. The students held their breath. But late at night, when everyone was gone and the building was empty, I would sit at the edge of the stage. Just like this. And I would listen. Listen to what? The girl with the glasses asked. The janitor touched his chest, right over his heart. to the music inside me. It never went away. All these years, it was still there, waiting. I could hear it when I closed my eyes. Every note, every chord. It was like a fire that would not go out, no matter how hard I tried to put it out. He looked at the students, his eyes red and wet. And sometimes, maybe once or twice a year, when I was sure no one would hear, I would sit at that piano, and I would let the fire out, just for a few minutes, just to remember what it felt like to be alive. The girl with the glasses stood up. She walked to the edge of the stage and reached out her hand. "You deserve to be heard," she said, her voice shaking. "The world needs to hear you." The janitor looked at her hand for a long time. Then, slowly, he took it. "Maybe," he said quietly, "maybe it is not too late." The girl with the glasses did not sleep that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in her mind. The music, the tears, the story. That sad, beautiful man in his faded uniform, pouring out decades of pain and love and sacrifice through his fingertips. She could not stop thinking about it. Around 3 a.m, she finally gave up on sleep. She sat up, grabbed her laptop, and opened the video her friend had recorded. She had watched it maybe 20 times already, but she watched it again, and again, and again. By sunrise, she had made a decision. She was not going to let this story disappear. She was not going to let this man fade back into the shadows like he had done for the past 19 years. The world needed to see this. The world needed to know. She uploaded the video to the internet. She did not think much about it at the time. She just wrote a simple caption. "The janitor at our concert hall just played the most incredible piano I've ever heard. This is his story." Then she went to class. When she checked her phone a few hours later, she nearly dropped it. The video had 10,000 views. By lunchtime, it had 50,000. By dinner, it had crossed 500,000. And it just kept climbing. People were sharing it everywhere. News websites were picking it up. Her inbox was flooded with messages from strangers asking questions, wanting to know more, begging her to tell them how to find him. The janitor had no idea any of this was happening. He showed up for work that evening, like he always did. Same routine, same faded uniform, same quiet smile for the security guards. He grabbed his cleaning cart, filled his bucket with soapy water, and started his rounds. It was the night security guard who told him first. A young man, maybe 25, who had always been kind to the janitor. He came running down the hallway with his phone in his hand, his eyes wide. Uncle, you have to see this." The janitor stopped mopping and looked at him, confused. "See what?" The security guard held up his phone. On the screen was a video of the janitor sitting at the Steinway playing Chopin. The view count underneath said 1.2 million. The janitor stared at it. His face went pale. His hands started to shake. "Where did this come from?" he whispered. "Those students from last night," the guard said. "One of them posted it online. Uncle, it is everywhere. Everyone is talking about you. You are famous." The janitor did not say anything. He just stood there, frozen, watching the tiny version of himself on the screen, watching his fingers fly across the keys, watching himself cry at the end. He felt like he was going to be sick. The next few days were chaos. Reporters showed up at Whitmore, asking questions, trying to get interviews. Camera crews camped outside the building. The janitor's face was on the news, on websites, on social media. People called him the secret virtuoso and the hidden genius. They made up stories about him. They speculated about his past. They turned him into something he never asked to be. He hated it. He stopped coming to work. He stayed in his small apartment, alone, with the curtains drawn. He did not answer the door. He did not answer the phone. He just sat in the darkness and tried to make sense of what was happening. He had spent 19 years being invisible. 19 years of peace and quiet. 19 years of hiding from the music he loved because he believed he did not deserve it anymore. And now, in one night, all of that was gone. The girl with the glasses came to find him. She got his address from one of the other staff members at Whitmore and showed up at his door with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said when he finally opened the door. "I did not mean for this to happen. I just wanted people to hear you. I wanted them to know how amazing you are." The janitor looked at her for a long time. She was so young, so full of hope and good intentions. She had no idea what she had done, but she had not done it to hurt him. He could see that he sighed and stepped aside to let her in. They talked for hours. She told him about all the messages she had received. People from all over the world saying how his music had moved them, how it had made them cry, how it had reminded them of their own parents, their own sacrifices, their own abandoned dreams. "You touch people," she said. "Millions of people. Do you understand that? Your music reached them. It meant something to them." The janitor sat quietly, listening. He did not know what to say. Then the girl told him the real reason she had come. "The artistic director at Whitmore wants to talk to you," she said. "He saw the video. He wants to offer you something." The janitor shook his head. "I am just a janitor. I clean floors. I am not a performer." "You are both," the girl said gently. "You can be both." 2 weeks later, the janitor walked into the artistic director's office. It was a beautiful room, full of awards and photographs and expensive furniture. The director was an older man himself, maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes. He stood up when the janitor entered and shook his hand warmly. "I have been at Whitmore for 30 years, the director said. "I have heard the greatest pianists in the world perform on our stage. And I have never, not once, heard anything like what I heard in that video." The janitor looked down at his shoes. "It was just something I do sometimes. Late at night, when no one is watching." "Well," the director said, smiling, "a lot of people are watching now." He made his offer. A solo performance at Whitmore's annual Winter Gala. The biggest event of the year. A full concert hall. A global audience watching online. A chance to share his music with the world. The janitor did not answer right away. He went home and thought about it for 3 days. He barely slept. He barely ate. He just sat in his apartment, thinking about his father, thinking about his mother, thinking about that broken piano in the old church and the boy who used to play it with stars in his eyes. On the 3rd day, he picked up the phone and called the director. "I will do it," he said. The night of the Winter Gala was cold and clear. Snow was falling gently outside, covering the city in a blanket of white. Inside Whitmore, the concert hall was packed. Every seat was taken. The balconies were full. People had flown in from other countries just to be there. Backstage, the janitor stood alone in the small dressing room. He was not wearing his uniform tonight. He was wearing a black suit, the first suit he had owned in 40 years. It fit him perfectly. The girl with the glasses had helped him pick it out. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. There was a knock at the door. A stagehand poked her head in. 5 minutes, she said. The janitor nodded. His hands were shaking. His heart was pounding. For a moment, he thought about running, just walking out the back door and disappearing into the snow. No one would blame him. No one would judge him. He could go back to being invisible, go back to being safe. But then he thought about his father, about those 3 extra years they had together, about the way his father used to smile when he talked about his son's music. "You have a gift," his father had told him once, near the end. "Promise me you will use it someday." Promise me you will not let it die." The janitor had made that promise. And for 19 years, he had broken it. Not anymore. He walked out of the dressing room and made his way to the wings of the stage. He could hear the crowd murmuring on the other side of the curtain. Thousands of people, waiting, hoping, expecting a miracle. The lights dimmed. The murmuring stopped. A single spotlight appeared on the stage, illuminating the grand piano. And then his name was announced. He walked out slowly, one step at a time. The applause that greeted him was deafening. People were on their feet before he even reached the piano. They were cheering, crying, clapping so hard their hands must have hurt. He looked out at them, at all those faces, strangers who had come to hear him play. His eyes found the girl with the glasses in the front row. She was smiling through her tears, her hands pressed over her heart. He sat down at the piano. The same piano he had cleaned around for 19 years. The same piano he had stared at from the shadows, afraid to touch, afraid to hope. He placed his fingers on the keys. The hall went silent, and then he played. He did not play the Chopin piece this time. He played something else, something he had written himself, alone in his apartment during all those sleepless nights. It was a piece about his life, about the village where he grew up, about the broken piano in the church, about the father who believed in him and the mother who loved him, about the years of sacrifice and silence and secret music and empty concert halls. It was the most beautiful thing anyone in that room had ever heard. The melody started soft, gentle, like a lullaby. Then it grew, swelling with emotion, rising like a wave. It crashed and thundered and wept and laughed. It told a story without words, a story everyone could understand. When the final note faded away, there was a moment of perfect silence. One heartbeat, two, and then the world exploded. The applause was like nothing Whitmore had ever heard. People were sobbing openly. They were hugging strangers. They were standing on their seats, screaming his name. The ovation lasted for 10 minutes, 15, 20. The janitor just sat at the piano, his head bowed, tears streaming down his face. He had done it. After all these years, he had finally kept his promise. Later that night, after the crowds had gone and the hall was empty again, the janitor walked back to the stage. He was still wearing his suit. His eyes were still red from crying. But there was something different about him now. Something lighter. Like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He sat down at the piano one more time. The spotlight was off. The seats were empty. It was just him and the music, like it had always been. He placed his fingers on the keys and smiled. And somewhere, he knew his father was smiling too.